Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
As long as the Matrix exists, the human race will never be free.
Start somewhere. It has to start sometime. What better place than here? What better time than now?
Terrorists! Terrorize this.
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
And where we go from there is on a journey to find the truth. Greetings, free thinkers, revolutionaries, anti-collectivists, and awakening sheeple. It is Thursday, January 5th, 2012, and as you can hear by my highly trained New World Order alert dogs, it is encroaching. You have found yourself sitting on the Group W bench here on the front lines in this war on our humanity. You guys get that? Allison restaurant reference there? Group W? Remember? Father rapers, mother stabbers, mother rapers, father stabbers, and we're only sitting on the Group W bench for wanting to know the truth. That's it. Right? I'm your host, Darren Stone, broadcasting to you live from the top of the food chain in FEMA Region 1. Tonight's call-in number is 917-889-3064. That is 917-889-3064. So, usual spiel, people, call in, let your voice be heard. Because remember, kids, standing at attention with your brandy new government-issued jumpsuit with the letters CI on the front and back of each sleeve and 4-inch tall black letters between the elbow and shoulder is not the time to make your voice heard. 917-889-3064. All righty. So, if you guys read the description, you know I have with me tonight a young guy, Madison Ruppert. He's a young writer, and he's making quite a splash in, I'll call it the truth movement. Kind of corny, but I'll just call it that. I've profiled a few articles from Madison on the show. One was the civilian internee article that we went through with a fine-tooth comb, thanks to Madison's research. And also the latest one we covered, I think it was on the last show, the signing of the NDAA. Madison has a website called endthelie.com, and he's also starting his own radio program on the Orion Talk Radio Network. I believe it is this Sunday at 1 p.m. Is that correct, Madison?
Actually, it's a little bit later. It's 8 to 10 p.m.
Okay.
Pacific.
Sorry about that.
And it ends at 1 a.m. Eastern.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's when the boss's radio show is on. Sorry, I forgot about that.
No worries.
It's at 8 o'clock. 8 to 10 on Orion, right?
Yes.
All right, and as you guys will hear tonight, Madison, very well spoken, so it should be a great show. But before we get going with you, Madison, let me just plug a few things. First, you guys, Facebook page members to the front, you see I just threw up a thing up there for the like contest. Everybody, members of my page who send me 5 friends to like the front, I'll send you a free T-shirt. Yeah, I know. Shameless promotion, but got to be done. And you get a free shirt, right? And we spread the word. Also, check out frontradio.net. And a few plugs for some of my friends. On Facebook, check out the page Behind the Curtain. It's a new truther page. Also, my friend Stephanie Sledge, check her daily truther headlines out, governmentrag.com. And, of course, I cannot leave out OrionTalkRadioNetwork.com. A lot of good friends over there. Also, FukushimaFacts.com and RadChick on Facebook for all your up-to-date Fukushima radiation news. All right, that does it for the plugs. So, Madison, I've been wanting to get you on the show for a little while, for the main reason being that I think you write great articles. Seems as though you have you do some decent research, you get some good details, and you have a firm grasp on what's going on. So, but before we talk about the subject at hand, I know you're a younger guy, right? And I don't want to make a big deal about that, but the reason I do want to talk about it for a second is because you're how old? Early 20s?
Yes, I'm 22 actually.
All right. Now, for me, I'm 43. Okay. When 9/11 went down, which most of us will consider the turning point as far as acceleration in the agenda, we'll call it. You were a young guy.
Very much so. Yeah, I remember it perfectly. I was actually in 6th grade.
Okay. And my question with with a young guy like yourself, you've pretty much your younger adult years now have been brought up in the way society has changed since 9/11 because, man, I remember we never heard the word terrorism, nothing like that. If we ever did, you would see a guy in the cockpit of a plane hanging out of it with a gun, and that's what you would see. That's what we knew of a terrorist, someone trying to hijack a plane to go to Ireland or to free the members of the IRA or whatever, if I remember long enough back then. And so after 9/11, I think we can come up with tallies about how many times a day we heard the word terrorism, and I think any of us who are awake to anything pretty much understand why we heard those terms repeated over and over and over again. But so tell me, man, how did you begin to wake up to what was going on, and when were you able to differentiate between what you were hearing, maybe in school, maybe on your television, in comparison to what you started seeing in reality? What woke you up?
Well, actually, it was pretty interesting. Your intro perfectly ties into this because I think it was Rage Against the Machine, actually, that when I started listening to them in, I believe it was 5th grade. I was pretty young and obviously impressionable, and I started listening to this stuff, and I was like, what are they talking about? So I started doing research and trying to get a really tenuous grasp on what was really going on in the world. And then 9/11 happened, and it kind of threw us all for a loop, across America. But I immediately thought it was a little bit weird that they could know who did it within the day. Because at school we had the TVs on, everyone was focused on it. A lot of the kids went home, but I stayed at school, and we were just watching the news, essentially, kind of abandoned the whole idea of school for the day. And it was just a matter of hours until they were like, Osama bin Laden. And, we were looking at each other like, how do they know this already? I mean, how does this happen? It really just did not make sense. And honestly, for a few years, I kind of fell out of it all. I was just doing other things. And then actually in my 11th grade year, I was pretty lucky that I went to a very unusual high school for the last 2 years, and my honors U.S. history teacher spent half of the year, so a semester, on investigating 9/11. And we were actually assigned 2 positions, one to research and defend the official story, or one to research and debunk the official story.
Wow.
And at the end of the year, we had a pretty intense debate, and I talked about this actually with James Corbett on his show. But not a single person defending the official story was able to come out on top for pretty obvious reasons. We didn't have to prove who did it or anything like that. It's just an official story versus the truth. And it's so easy to poke holes in the official story. It's almost a joke, really.
Right.
When you get into the facts. I mean, the whole, invincible passport thing, the planes flying wildly off course, doing this insane maneuver that no one can replicate with a guy who couldn't even fly a single engine Cessna.
Right.
Muslim radicals doing cocaine and going to strip clubs. It just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And from that point, I just kind of went off, down the rabbit hole, as they say, and it just branched off into so many different areas of research. And I honestly don't consider myself a 9/11 expert by any means. I think there are people who have thousands of times more information on it than I do, but I can just sit there and present to someone who previously 100% believed the official story. You can just present 5 things to them that make absolutely no sense and say, explain this to me, please. Explain to me how a building with minor structural fires collapsed at near free fall speed or free fall speed, depending on who you ask, that wasn't hit by a plane, that had no major structural damage. It was just small localized fires that were under control. I just want people to explain these things, and often they can't. And unfortunately, it gets to the point where people just say, well, I don't want to think about it. That's a reply that I get quite often. I don't want to think about the fact that my government could have let this happen or done it themselves even.
Right. And what do you attribute that reaction to?
I think it's cognitive dissonance, really. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's a psychological concept which basically says, I mean, it's kind of outdated at this point, but it basically says that you can't hold 2 wildly conflicting thoughts in your mind at the same time. Mm-hmm. So you can't say reality is how I know it, and then you see someone walk through a wall who came from the future, or something like that. You're going to be like, well, what's going on? I can't reconcile these 2 things. And that's kind of like holding the conviction that we have a just government that is representing us and keeping us safe from the bad guys, compared to our government letting thousands of people die, or even causing thousands of people to die, to push forward an agenda, which became quite clear. I don't think there is much debate that surrounding the fact that 9/11 was used, as a pretext to push through the Patriot Act without our representatives even reading it.
Right.
I think that's pretty much everyone can agree that's what happened. And then we look at how the Patriot Act was used after the fact. Less than 20 terrorism cases, hundreds of drug-related cases. It's just become more clear that our government is not working for us. And I think it's actually the cognitive dissonance is getting so strong with the National Defense Authorization Act that it's kind of polarizing people. People are either becoming so absurdly out there saying that the government can absolutely do no wrong. The language that's in the bill will never be used as it is written, and instead will be used for totally innocuous, great purposes to protect us from those big bad terrorists, right. Stuff like that. And then there is the greater trend, I think, of more and more people every day waking up to the fact that our government is not our government anymore. It's just a bunch of people saying they are our government and robbing us blind.
Right.
Under the pretext.
So the cognitive dissonance thing that you mentioned, basically it's information does not compute. I need to fall back on the belief system that I was indoctrinated with.
Yes, essentially. It's just the dissonance comes in where the 2 ideas are so dissonant. They cannot be reconciled in any way that someone actually has to refuse the legitimacy of the idea that conflicts with what they believe. And it comes in a lot of situations, but I think this situation is especially pertinent because we're brought up to think our government is perfect. You know, luckily I went to, I don't know if it was lucky or not, but I went to a pretty liberal school growing up, and we didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance or anything like that, but my parents actually made me go into the Boy Scouts for several years, and there, you know, we say the Pledge of Allegiance, we did all these things, you know, saying these oaths, raising our hands and all this stuff, and I bet if you went back and talked to a lot of those people about this kind of stuff, they would just say no, you know, no,
right.
That's impossible, it couldn't be.
And that's really the only argument that they really have is I've had people call the show and say, really, do you honestly believe, and there's the key word, that our government would do something like that? Well, I just you know, if I feel like answering or addressing it, you know, I would pretty much say something along the lines of, when have they ever told the truth? You know, and when you're referring back to the wording in the NDAA, and how people will say our government would never do that. Well, look, you know, that would be great, but they should put that in writing.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, I'm not going to trust them. You've lied to me pretty much every time you open your mouth. Why would I ever believe? And the other thing is crazy, you know, like you get these Obama zombies, okay, people that love the guy, okay, and I'm going to tell you, I voted for him, okay, but I'll never do that again. I mean, I'll never vote for anybody again. I did it because I couldn't bring myself to vote for McCain, so I figured I'd have somebody different lie to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he made a lot of great promises.
Well, he was a marketing tool. He told us everything we wanted to hear. You know, he talked the pants right off you. You know, I mean, I'll end the war in 16 weeks. You know, that was a big one. You know, and so, you know, he was rolled out and told us everything we wanted to hear. You know, so I voted for him. But you know, the thing is that when you get these people that are blinded by him still, and I was really not even a fan of the two-party system when I voted for him. I just couldn't bring myself to check McCain. I just couldn't do it because I knew he wanted to go bomb Iran ASAP. So I figured I'd roll the dice with this other guy. I've got an education, you know, since that, like a lot of people have. But you know, when you hear the people that still stand behind the guy, and you're saying, you know, these are the people that say, look, they would never do that. Again, we go back to cognitive dissonance, really, don't we? I mean, they're just, again, falling back on the belief system. So even if they love this guy, Obama, and they know his approval ratings aren't that great, they know he has a good chance of not getting elected if you still believe in elections, and so they're going to get a Republican in here, you would think that these people might be a little concerned with a guy like Dick Cheney coming in with this type of power. You think that in itself would make them, you know, come to the realization that, hey, my guy isn't going to be president forever, although I disagree, he just might be. But you know what I'm saying? So what? Yeah.
Well, one thing I think is really important is the word that you said, belief.
Right.
When people say, do you believe that they would actually do something like this? I don't. I hope beyond all hope that I am absolutely wrong, that I'm a complete idiot, and that I will look like a total ass when absolutely nothing happens. Seriously, that is my deepest hope that there is. I hope beyond everything that I am completely wrong and totally off base. But the fact is, I don't base what I cover on belief or opinion. I just base it off the facts. I mean, you can just look at history.
Just like you did in your 9/11 project in school.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I didn't go into that thinking our government is a bunch of evil bastards who would gladly slaughter a bunch of people. In fact, I mean, I have cognitive dissonance because I was raised to believe that at least our government would protect us to some degree. They wouldn't let thousands of people be slaughtered in order to push through legislation. But once I started doing the research, it was kind of hard to reconcile that with the facts. I mean, it's just you get to a point where you hit a brick wall. You say, okay, either I'm going to turn around and ignore this brick wall, or I'm going to smash through this brick wall and try and get at the truth. as uncomfortable and unfortunate as it may be. And that's exactly the case with the National Defense Authorization Act. It really is a brick wall and a turning point in people's minds where they either have to break through that and start accepting that this is real, this is now, you can read the legislation and look at it for yourself and look at the expert legal opinions. I've actually had several extended email debates with people, and I'm saying this is not my opinion. I am not a legal expert. I'm not a constitutional lawyer, nor do I pretend to be. I'm citing the opinions of experts, and I'm also citing historical precedent. And I think one of the most pertinent ones is the Patriot Act and how it's been used. And the Patriot Act in and of itself is absolutely disturbing once you get into it. But even more troubling is the fact, and again, this is a fact, it's not a belief or opinion, is that Senator Ron Wyden actually covered this in, I believe it was May of last year. It's surprising saying that already, last year. But he covered in Wired, actually, of all places, in their blog, The Danger Room, I believe it was, or Threat Level. They have two pretty good blogs on there, actually. But he covered the so-called Secret Patriot Act, which is a classified interpretation of the Patriot Act used by the Department of Justice. And that is so classified that members of Congress, actually members on the House Intelligence Committee, can't know how the law is being interpreted. And I say that with a bit of a chuckle because it is so absurd.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. I mean, it is so out there. It is really hard to grasp that our government would, first of all, pass a law as wildly unconstitutional, so absurdly far-ranging and disturbing, really, when you get into the meat of the Patriot Act. And then on top of it, they will interpret it in a way and not even tell you how the way in which they are interpreting it. I think that it really shows that people who are saying, well, they wouldn't do this with the National Defense Authorization Act. Oh, it'll just be used on terrorists, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, what makes you think that? They haven't proven themselves to be trustworthy when it comes to this stuff ever. I mean, give me one instance.
And I guess you could point out the list of what qualifies you as being a terrorist, and that may, paying in cash, wearing jeans, being a nice guy, having a Ron Paul bumper sticker, all of these things, believing in the Constitution, doing radio shows like this, being guests on radio shows like this, having your own radio show. You know what I mean? I mean, when people say the word terrorist, they get, and I'm sure they get this mental image of a Middle Eastern person. They're not associating the wording and the language that's being spoken to them by the people penning this legislation.
Exactly. When people think of a terrorist, they think of someone, coming over from the Middle East, flying over here and, going underground and looking real shady and,
right.
Scoping out things and all this stuff. It's just absurd. That completely is not how it is, and that is not how the government sees terrorists anymore. And you're right, all you have to do is look at, for instance, the MIAC report is a great example. That's the one that said the Ron Paul bumper stickers, Chuck Baldwin bumper stickers, Gadsden flag, which is, symbols of the founding of our nation now are signs that you might be a dangerous terrorist. And another really crazy one was the memo put out by the Department of Homeland Security to the United States Lodging Association or something along those lines. I'm blanking on the name of the group, but it's the group that most large hotel chains are part of.
Right.
And it was guidelines for spotting suspicious terrorist activity, and it was like insisting on paying with cash.
Yeah. I played that commercial a few shows ago, and if you watch that thing, and it's so suggestive. It's such a psyop, that whole thing. they completely brush over the fact that the guy presents ID in the commercial. The hotel manager says, well, did he show ID? And the woman's like, well, yes, but, she goes right by that very, very, very quickly. But it's just so weird, and she elongates the weird part, I pick up on all this stuff, how it's presented,
Yeah, and that's very important because all of this stuff is a psychological operation, And just talking, most people, first of all, if you say psyops, they're saying, what is that? Is that something off Star Trek or something? Most people have no idea that there is even a large unit in the Army called the Psychological Operations Group or Division. I mean, it's something that just kept out of the public eye, especially when it comes to instances of psychological operations on our own soil, say, against our own so-called representatives. So if they're doing it to, government insiders or, supposedly government insiders to try and influence their decisions, as they got busted doing last year at some point, or maybe it was the year before, what makes you think that they wouldn't be this to the American people? They have
having a little audio issue with you, Madison. Let me see. All right, I think we lost him for a second. I don't know why. Am I off the air too? Am I off the air? Am I off the air? Let's see. You can hear me? I am on? Okay. All right, thank you. Don't know what happened with Madison. Skype is telling me there's a problem with the call. We'll get him back as soon as possible. Sorry about that, you guys. Let me reconnect this. All right. Let me see here. Madison, are you back? Let's see. Sorry about this, everybody. Hold on. All right, Madison is offline right now. All right, so sorry about that, you guys. It's just a delay with Skype, and the net just started running slow, so I apologize. As soon as he comes back online, I will pick him up. But, a pretty smart kid, right? Really. To understand the whole cognitive dissonance thing, and that's pretty cool, his school putting him through a 9/11 project like that. A lot of people might consider that not patriotic or some weird stuff like that, but that's what promotes critical thinking. And that's really why the government doesn't want you to critically think, and that's why your school systems, your public school systems, are state-run and collect federal subsidies and basically have to abide by state rules, which trickle up to federal rules. And that's why you don't have critical thinking in schools, because it leads people to understand reality like young Madison does, and leads him to not believe the official story of 9/11, and that makes him question everything. And then you're not a very malleable citizen, and they don't like that. So I think that's awesome. I think that school was out here in Massachusetts. I believe Madison is originating from FEMA Region 1. Let's see. He is still not back online yet. All right. Well, I guess the things I wanted to talk to him about was I want to get into a little more detail with the NDAA. I want to, you know what I want to ask him about? I'm going to ask him about the crazy stuff, okay? Because he's looked through this thing with a fine-tooth comb. I want to ask him about the bestiality and torture stuff in the NDAA. Is that real? I don't know. I want to ask him. I also want to ask him about the KBR 72-hour response teams. See what he has to say about those. Maybe we can debunk those. I don't know. Well, those were right in his official article. What else do I want to ask that guy? Timing of the signing of the Patriot Act, of the NDAA. I want to ask him about that. All right. Well, I don't know where he is, but I don't want to move on unless he. I guess I will though. Oh, let me see. All right. Well, we'll have a little fun while we're waiting for Madison to get back. I found this article right before I went on the air. State police tase Darth Vader. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I think that guy's in for a world of hurt myself. I think he's going to be finding himself choking by a mysterious invisible hand sooner rather than later. But here's the official story. A Florida highway patrol trooper was attacked in Orlando early Thursday by a man wearing a Darth Vader mask. The word attacked is probably suspect. Perhaps Darth Vader approached him, maybe placed his hand on his shoulder in a friendly gesture, asking for directions. Sometimes police misconstrue that as an attack or as what do you call it, threatening behavior, or she came at me. That was an excuse an officer used when he beat up a woman in her bed, an elderly woman. She came at me. Oh, Madison is back online. So let me grab him so you don't have to listen to me dribble. Let's see. Oh, there he is. You back?
Yes. Sorry
right.
about that.
That's all right.
Skype seems to love to crash my internet for some reason.
Does it usually happen when you're doing shows, or does it happen any old time?
Only when I'm doing shows.
Isn't that odd?
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to think that this show or myself or I'm important enough, or I'm doing something that's big enough to warrant attention from the powers that be. But there is a lot of oddities with that stuff.
Well, when you think about it, it would be extremely easy for them to do a keyword-based kind of obfuscation thing where, say, like the old echelon system, which is completely outdated nowadays. It's declassified. You could read through it. It was based on flagged keywords that people would say, which would then get their conversations recorded and all that kind of stuff. But with the internet now, it'd be so easy to recognize a certain keyword and just cut off an internet connection or cut the speed in half or something like that. It could be totally automated. And with the sheer computing power that the Department of Homeland Security and National Security Agency have at their fingertips, it really would be completely realistic for them to do something like that. And it wouldn't require any kind of notoriety on behalf of the person speaking or anything. Even China was able to do it. There were reports a while ago of them. If you said, I believe it was if you said protest or demonstration or something like that on phone, the line would just cut off instantly. So that it really doesn't require anyone being some kind of bigwig or anything. I think that's a common misconception. This kind of technology is easily applied to every single little bit of communication.
You're right. No, I do know that. I just sometimes I don't want to come across it. A lot of people don't know that. I talk about filter programs and things like that, but a lot of people don't know that. So I don't want to come across like they're probably cutting me up, because then you sound a little paranoid. So that's why That's why I say I'm not big enough. It's probably just a crazy coincidence that happens almost every single time I'm on the air. All right. Yeah. So hey, let's get down to some specific things here, because I have some questions about the NDAA. Explain to me a little bit, or to us a little bit, about the KBR 72-hour response teams.
Okay, well, that was extremely interesting, that whole scenario, because it was either the day after or likely the day of the introduction of S-1867, which was the final version of the National Defense Authorization Act that was passed by the Senate. That was the final version, and the previous version being S-1253. That was introduced on November 15th, and then around 10 a.m. the next day, November 16th, states received an email blast from KBR talking about looking for subcontractors to build a so-called National Quick Response Team, which is a group of subcontractors in all of the fields that they need, like sanitation, food, laundry, everything that would be required to run a detention center or an emergency response center, as they would like to put it, for a period of time.
And again, the emergency could be, oh my God, the masses are after us.
Oh, yeah. Well, the whole problem is, if you go back to the executive order that was signed by Bush Jr., I believe, I'm blanking on the exact number, but it was the executive order that allowed for what we call FEMA camps, which are military installations converted for emergency housing, in quotes. But the major thing is that all of this stuff has been put in place for some time. In 2006, KBR, at that point, they were still a subsidiary of Halliburton. Now they are not, actually. People keep saying they're a subsidiary of Halliburton, but now they are actually their own independent corporation. But in 2006, got the contracts to start converting military installations, building new detention centers, all this kind of stuff. And now they're the whole RFI, I believe, is the acronym, Request for Information. That's off the top of my head. I'm probably wrong about that. But
Freedom of Information Act?
No. The request for information for subcontractors for the National Quick Response Team that they sent out. That is basically establishing a group that on 72 hours notice they can have people in the camps and have it ready to go in 72 hours. I mean, that is the line, and they're creating it in one in every state. They actually break them down into regions that very closely relate to the FEMA regions. Yeah. But the major thing is that it's very odd timing. You can say it's coincidental if you want to take the coincidental view of history, where there's no such thing as a conspiracy and everything just worked out so crazily coincidentally, and it's just chance, blind chance.
It always works out for those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
It never works out for us or anybody else. They're so lucky.
Exactly, that's what it is.
Halliburton, so lucky that they just happened to buy Boots and Scoots Oil Cleanup Company just a week before the BP oil spill. I mean, that's why those guys are at the top, Madison, because they have that foresight.
Oh, yeah, and Larry Silverstein insuring the towers, that was just pure luck.
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
and the plane, or arguably the plane that hit the Pentagon, it was just blind luck that it wiped out all the records of the $2.3 trillion that went missing, announced by Rumsfeld the day before on September 10th, 2001.
Hey, 1 out of 5 shot.
Coincidence.
1 out of 5 shot, Madison.
Yeah. But I mean, I just find it very interesting that if it's not coincidence, which seems a little bit stretching credulity there. It's pretty strange that they put out this request for subcontractors the exact day or the day after that Senate Bill 1867 was introduced, meaning that they obviously knew it was going to pass, which it did with a 93% margin. I mean, that number should be disturbing to every American, that only 7 senators voted against the indefinite detention of Americans, and they shot down an amendment by Dianne Feinstein, who is one of my senators, so far from a Feinstein supporter reporter here, it's not even funny, but she did introduce, to her credit, an amendment that supposedly would restrict the indefinite detention of American citizens. Of course, that got shot down. Honestly, I think that was just
for show.
a PR stunt. Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
And Landry, who's from Louisiana, Jeff Landry, introduced an amendment called the Due Process Guarantee Act of 2011, I believe is what it was called. But the problem is that the NDAA already passed. Okay, so they're trying to amend it after it passed, after the fact. And Landry actually voted for H.R. 1540, which is the House version of the NDAA. So once again, I think it's a commenter on NDAA pointed this out. They called it a CYA moment, a cover your ass kind of attempt. And I think that's really what it is. I think they're scrambling now to be like, oh, look, I'm not a traitor. Look, I tried to do this, and then they just didn't want it. It's like, well, you voted for it. Sorry, buddy. And one thing that really irks me is Ron Paul now speaking out against the NDAA, which he should be doing, but he didn't vote against the bill, H.R. 1540. He actually abstained from voting. And, I mean, I don't know. If I was a representative, I would take time out of my campaigning schedule, fly back to Washington, and vote against that. I mean, it is some of the most disturbing legislation that has ever been passed. So the fact that he speaks out now after the fact, I'm just a little leery of that whole thing. But obviously, Ron Paul is the only candidate running amongst the Republicans who's even remotely competent. So
hey, Madison, everybody's telling me that your audio is breaking up really bad. I don't know why. I hear you perfectly.
Oh man, I can hop in the car, go to where I get service, and call you on the phone. Would that be better? Do you think?
If you want, but you know what? Let's try. Let me just try. Let's try to reconnect this call one more time. I don't want you to have to do that. All right. So I'll conference you back in a second. Everybody, hang on 1 second. I'm going to try to reconnect us. All right. All right. We have reconnected, everybody. You're there, right, Madison?
Yes. Is that any better now?
You sound great to me. I'm thinking it might be Blog Talk Radio tonight. I don't know because our Skype connection is great.
Yeah, you sound good on my end. I'm connected to the internet, okay, or at least it looks like it.
Yeah. So it must be them, and there's really nothing I can do about that. But, all right. So more about the NDAA now. Okay, 72-hour response teams. We covered. I don't want to get in. I got to ask you this, okay? Because you've gone through this thing. It seems like I have not. To be honest with you, I don't do a lot of deep, in-depth research anymore. I did it for almost 10 years. I think I have a pretty firm grasp on what's going on. I don't feel the need to go out and prove points to people at this point. So I don't do that, and that's why I wanted to on the show. Is there something in this thing that refers to bestiality? Is that a rumor?
No, that is actually in the NDAA that they removed the ban on bestiality and sodomy from active forces members. They removed that restriction from the Uniform Code of Military Justice for some strange reason. I have no idea why that is, honestly. I just think it's kind of strange.
Now, is this how is it worded? Is it worded like they've removed the restrictions on bestiality and sodomy between military service members or in certain situations? I mean, how is it worded?
I think, as usual, it's worded extremely vaguely. I think it's just removing the prohibition of those acts. I think it's being done under, I can't say about the bestiality. That honestly makes no sense to me, but the sodomy makes sense given that they, the whole repealing of Don't Ask, Don't Tell only makes sense that they would allow that. But the bestiality to me makes absolutely no sense. I mean, it's really kind of confusing, really. But honestly, I think that very well might be something they threw in there to get social conservatives outraged and not outraged about the actual indefinite detention provisions. Because if you look in some of the more conservative-leaning websites like CNS News, they were one of the first people to point out the whole bestiality thing, and yet, you know, they didn't really highlight the indefinite detention. I mean, honestly, if it came down to it, if I had to choose between soldiers having sex with sheep or locking up American citizens indefinitely or shipping them off to foreign countries or torturing them or just outright assassinating them, you know, I would settle for soldiers having sex with sheep.
Well, of course,
because
it's none of our business, and they're not hurting anybody except, you know, the sheep maybe, I guess. But
yeah,
you know,
after saying that.
I agree with you on that. But you know, I can't really see that as being used as something to get a certain political party or members of a political party upset, because was it really thrown out there in the media that much? Or are you saying you saw it in more conservative websites talking about it?
I saw it more, definitely not in the establishment media, because I think we all know there's not a single conservative establishment media outlet out there. I mean, and that includes Fox News. But the more socially conservative websites were kind of in uproar about it, especially because the supposedly socially conservative members of Congress and Senate just glossed over it. You know, they didn't really even address it at all. But when it comes down to it, I think what it's doing is just trying to get people to focus on certain aspects of it and bicker over these things that really don't matter in order to
have people argue over moral issues rather than their civil rights, sovereign rights, and freedom being taken away from them.
Yes, exactly. But at the same time, I think this is a moral issue. You know, it does reflect the moral bankruptcy of our nation that we would even consider doing this for not only American citizens but people abroad. You know, we're supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we set the example for the rest of the world in terms of justice, in terms of safety of our citizens. You don't have to walk down the street worrying that you'll get snatched up by a bunch of people in black masks and they throw a bag over your head, drug you, and you wake up in a different country. But unfortunately, that is what we've become. And I think that really has degraded our it's called soft power. It's a concept in international relations of, well, this used to be the case where the United States could kind of get people to go along with us just because we were a morally upstanding nation that set a good example for everyone else. But now if we try and leverage soft power against anyone, we'll just get laughed out of the room. Like, what moral authority do you have? You know, you're locking up your own citizens indefinitely, torturing them, all these kinds of horrific stuff that we associate with, you know, brutal autocratic regimes. And I think that we can go back to cognitive dissonance there. People will see this. I mean, I think actually...
Ugh. Unbelievable. It's the Audio Nightmare Show. Welcome to my nightmare. Is that an Alice Cooper song? Yeah. Must have hit some key words in there, everybody. We must have hit some key words like bestiality, sodomy. Don't know. Madison is bumped off the line again. I believe it's just him. It could be me as well. If you guys still hear me, let me know in chat. You know, and let me apologize right now to people who download this program and listen later. There's a delay with this, with broadcasting over Blog Talk Radio. So when my audio cuts out and you guys can't hear me,
I really don't know that's happening until I get feedback directly from the chat room, and there's probably about a 30-second delay. So when you are downloading this program, if you hear me acting like an idiot or sounding like one, it's all I have to work with, everybody. Sorry. Let's see if we can get Madison back. No, he's offline again. Okay. Well, pretty disturbing news, right? I mean, I read about the bestiality and sodomy thing as being part of the NDAA, but I kind of chalked it up to a little bit of internet conspiracy. But as you can see, it is actually in the legislature. I mean, people, when are we going to put an end to all this? I mean, we are definitely, and I'm no Christian, you got to know that to listen to the show. I'm not touting Christianity, whatever, whatever. But if we're going to go on with the story that we're told, the lies that we're told, we are supposedly a Christian-based nation, and I do know that, the basic rules of Christianity, some of them are nice ones, don't hurt anybody, don't steal, don't murder, none of these things. You got things like bestiality in there, and you have torture in there, and the wars that we wage, and the people that we assassinate, and all the things that we allow our government structure to do to us. It doesn't really hold any water as far as any Christian value, as far as I can see. But again, I'm no devout Christian. I could be getting the rules mixed up, But it's just mind blowing when you really think about it. I was talking to my friend today, and why do all of us have to be involved in all these conflicts and these wars? We don't. I mean, do any of you personally have any issue with any Iranians? Do you have any issue with any Iraqis or Afghanis or Libyans or anybody any country that we've overthrown or invaded? None of us have an issue with these people. Why don't our leaders, with all the tough talk and all the tough rhetoric, why don't they just, duke it out themselves? Why don't they go duke it out themselves? I don't know. Sounds like a good idea to me. I don't know why. I mean, think about it. It's if you're going by playground rules, you wouldn't start a fight and then run behind all your friends and have your friends fight for you. That's not being a man of integrity or fairness or standing up for what you're believing in. You're just starting a bunch of crap and running away and letting everybody fight it out for you. That's really what our leaders do. I don't understand how much of this we're going to take, and I don't know. People have this problem with worrying about not having government or what do we do next. Again, I don't know what we do next, but I know we can't keep doing this. Because they're gonna kill us all, everybody. I mean, they're gonna bring us to thermonuclear worldwide war because they're afraid of Iran, supposedly, this is the story, getting a missile and shooting it at us. So instead, we'll just shoot off missiles all over the planet. I don't know. I posted up a video about Iran on the Front's Facebook page, so you guys check that out. Now, look, I can't confirm that video is directly from Iran. But it doesn't have to be. The main issue is this. I don't think any of us have any personal issues with any Iranian people. So if these guys want to go start a war with somebody, why don't we have Barack and Ahmadinejad throw down on pay-per-view? Okay? Proceeds go to charity. Sounds good to me. Madison, you back?
Yes, I am.
All right. They're gunning for you tonight.
Yeah, really. Crazy.
Must have hit some of those key words like bestiality and sodomy.
Yeah. Did you actually see a while ago the Department of Homeland Security, or maybe it was the NSA, I think it was actually DHS, came out with a press release talking about how they're putting out this new system to monitor tweets, and the Electronic Privacy Information Center covered this in detail, and it was really insane, a lot of the keywords. I mean, if you type immigrants or outbreak, or, I mean, all of these, seemingly innocuous issues, drill. I mean, literally, if you put drill on Twitter, you're going to get followed by Department of Homeland Security and NSA dummy accounts. So, I mean, people saying that, well, you're not that special. Why would they be tracking what you say? And it's like, well, it doesn't matter. That's not what it's about. It's about dragnet surveillance, not about targeted surveillance.
Right. So, look, in the beginning of the program, you were saying something along the lines of, you hope you're wrong. You hope you look like the biggest idiot out there. You really want to be. And I think most of us that do this type of thing, I think we've all said that. I've often said that on the show. Please, if anybody can call in and prove me wrong, please do, because I want to be wrong. I want to go back to caring about things like my fantasy football lineup, my workout for that day, things like that. You know what I mean? But I can't, because I understand what's going on around us, and I feel the need to talk about it, not only for myself as some type of therapy, but also to give other people a medium to talk in and to get information from, and to wake some people up if I can do that, so they can make more informed decisions as we stumble through the matrix. But after you said that, you hope you're proven wrong. In your heart, you honestly know you are 100% right.
Yes, and it's unfortunate. That's what I say. I wish I was wrong, but this is not based on belief. This is not based on my opinion. I'm just going off of what I can actually verify for myself. And I wish I could verify all of this stuff untrue and that I could debunk it, but I just can't. I would have to manufacture evidence, or cherry pick evidence to find stuff that follows the narrative that I want to present. But any way I would be doing that would be deceiving myself and other people, and that's what my website is about. I'm trying to get past that. I'm trying to get past the whole BS of partisan politics that's trying to divide people so they can't think about these kind of issues. They can't think about the fact that, there's continuity of agenda between every administration, and they're stuck saying, oh, you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, oh, we disagree about this and that. But I think everyone can agree that they don't want to see their neighbor, however much they dislike them. They don't want to see the military kick down their door and drag them off to a black site somewhere to never be heard from again. I think everyone can agree on these most basic issues.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to people that are supporters of the current administration. They can find lots of things wrong with the political right, because as they're supposed to, as they've been conditioned to, argue about morality issues that'll never change most people's core, and that's why they've been implemented into the political arena, in my opinion, to keep people arguing about things like that. But instead of focusing on actual important things as far as politics go, but when they can support this administration, it's the disconnect that the next administration might not like what they think, and they may be subject to these laws. I mean, when you're talking about pledging allegiance to a political party at this point in the game, and I do think the game, you have to be really conditioned, brainwashed. I don't know what the right terminology is, but it doesn't seem to matter what level of intelligence you supposedly have. And my point is, and people who listen to this show regularly are going to be like, oh God, not again, he's going to tell this story. I'll keep it short, everybody. I'll keep it short. But I had a conversation a couple times with a guy, a NASA rocket scientist. Okay, he has a pretty high level clearance. He doesn't talk about much the things that he can do or that he does. But you're right, a fairly intelligent person, right? He's been with NASA since the 60s, right?
Yes,
you'd think he'd be intelligent, right? So we were talking about the physics of 9/11, and when you mentioned the passport thing, paper passport flying out of a hijacker's pocket, surviving a tower inferno and being found by the FBI. When I mentioned that to him, it was like something in his head, it clicked, and he looked at me with a very mad look, and through gritted teeth, the question was, do you honestly believe that? And he looked at me, and through gritted teeth, he said, yes, I do.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to.
So Madison, my thing is, why can a young guy like you, who pretty much has grown up in this era of war on terror, and a middle-aged guy like me, why are we able to see through that stuff? And I have a community college degree, okay? Why and a NASA rocket scientist cannot?
Well, I think it really comes down to the issue of separating intelligence with ignorance. You can be vastly intelligent, absolutely a genius across the board, and be wildly ignorant. And that's really what it comes down to. And I think that NASA scientist that you spoke of is ignorant. And people take ignorance as a kind of insult, and they think if someone calls you ignorant, it's this huge affront to your person. I disagree. I consider myself ignorant on so many issues. And I think that's what makes me, at least, able to investigate these kinds of things with an open mind and without going into it saying, okay, this is the conclusion that I'm going to come out of this with. When I first started looking into the National Defense Authorization Act, I didn't know what it was about. I didn't go into it thinking this is the most horrible thing that has ever happened to America. Oh my God, I just went into it saying, I'm going to look into this because someone actually emailed me about it and said, why aren't you covering this? And I was like, well, I'm ignorant. I had no idea that this even existed. So I started looking into it, and then I came to my conclusions. And I think the big problem is that people are so insulated with their friend circle, with the media they consume, with their internet habits. They get indoctrinated into this certain little bubble of belief, and it gets so strong that anything that tries to break through that bubble just gets bounced right back off with a vengeance, and it gets polarized. So, and that's exactly what I believe the two-party system is designed to do, especially when it comes to moral issues that, in my opinion, should really have no place in politics, especially when we have so many pressing problems. I really don't think we should worry about gay people doing whatever they want. Honestly, I could not care less what you do in your own home as long as you're not hurting someone.
Right. That's how. And see, what you're using there is common sense. That's what you're using, and that's what we are severely lacking, or what most people are severely lacking. It's just common sense. It's what common law, what the land was based on, was based on common sense law.
Exactly. You don't stab your neighbor or steal things from them. It's just common sense. It's just common decency. Right. And a lot of these concepts have just been removed from our society. Well, it's not illegal, so why can't I do it? Or all these kinds of things, like our so-called representatives absolutely robbing us blind by acting on insider information and getting filthy rich while people are getting kicked out of their homes because they can't make mortgage payments, and they're saying, well, it's not illegal. There's no law saying I can't do it. And it's like, well, what about your moral fiber? Doesn't that feel wrong to you? I mean, if you find a wallet on the ground full of cash and the person's ID in it, there probably isn't a law that says you can't take the cash and leave the wallet there, but a good person would pick it up and get in contact with the person whose wallet it is. It takes 5 minutes. I mean, there are some disturbing examples of how horrible people are, but on the other hand, this is a great example of what I think, there are still great people out there. Like a long time ago, I used to go backpacking a lot, and I was with my dad, and he lost his wallet somewhere out in Joshua Tree, which is this massive desert, and he was just like, okay, it's gone, whatever. Months later, he gets a FedEx package with his wallet all tattered up, and everything, with every single dollar, every single credit card, everything in it. And the guy just mailed it to, some guy in the middle of nowhere found this and mailed it off to him, on his own dime. But that's something that's extremely lacking nowadays. If there's not a cop there saying, oh, are you going to mail that back to the person? A lot of people would say, okay, whatever, it's mine now.
Right.
And I think that degradation is what has allowed us to get this far. And I don't consider myself a social conservative, yet when I talk about morality and bankrupt morality, people are like, oh, okay, you're some, Christian right guy. Oh, you're going to tell me all gay people are, going to hell and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, no, that's so wrong. It's almost insane.
Right.
It's like, I'm not going to beat someone up just because I can.
Right.
Maybe you could, and you could get away with it, but does that mean you should? No. I mean, it's just like common sense, and it really gets to me when people think this is some kind of weird thing to have a moral compass, to say, well, killing is wrong no matter what.
Right.
People say, I've written a lot about the whole issues with Israel and Palestine, and that gets some of the most polarized reactions of any topic you can cover. I mean, I get some of the most hateful comments I ever have received on that topic.
It's the only time I've gotten hateful backlash on my program was when I talked about Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, and it's insane to me because one of the most common comments is, okay, so you support terrorists.
Yeah.
And I say, wait, no, I'm saying that killing is wrong no matter who does it. Palestinian, Israeli, American, Chinese, Iranian, if you're killing someone, you are wrong, okay? Unless someone's breaking into your house and about to murder you, I do not think there is a legitimate reason to kill someone. And people they can't seem to, it's cognitive dissonance, once again, they can't seem to reconcile that, okay, well, my country says it's okay to kill people under this circumstance, but when other people fight back, then it's wrong, but we're right killing them. It's just this circular logic that makes absolutely no sense, and people can't seem to put two and two together and say, well, hey, why is there a business called war? Why are people profiting off of death? I mean, it's just like the whole idea seems so absurd to me, yet people can somehow deal with it. I mean, I just don't understand how they can say, well, these people are wrong killing us, but we're okay killing them. It just makes no sense.
There's a comment in chat, and I was actually kind of going here because you were kind of going there a little earlier when you were speaking. The comment it says, it's not the common people's fault that they've become so morally bankrupt. The mainstream media has conditioned people from every conceivable angle. And I really believe that to be true. I know when I talk to people and I say, look, I think the human beings are, inherently good inside. Most of us, don't want to hurt other people. Most of us don't want to, exploit people for our own personal gain. Most people just want to be left alone, enjoy their lives, enjoy the things that are important to them, and be as happy as they basically can be, But then I get people who say, yeah, but did you read the story about the guy who murdered his 2 daughters and blah, 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 and yes, of course, I know those things are out there, but I believe that this has been, in my opinion, the farther that we've been pulled away from nature, and the reason I say nature, now I'm not chaining myself to a tree or anything, Madison, so don't get that visual. I'm just saying, as far as our food chain goes, the way that we live, what we consider to be important, things like that have moved us far away from nature or our origin, we've become disconnected, and in my opinion, we've become more sick in many different ways. And when people are put into dire situations or situations where they have, and we'll use cognitive dissonance again, constant cognitive dissonance on multiple levels, from multiple angles, on multiple subject lines through their entire life, well then your entire view on reality and how you act and what you think is important is going to be completely skewed. And I think that's why we see these certain parts of society breaking down morally. And when I say that too, don't get me wrong, I'm not a church going. I mean, I'm like you, I think. I just say, look, if you're not hurting anybody, you do whatever you want, man. I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool with me. But, when we get people who do these terrible things, I think they're more or less a product of their environment, and I think that the system has actually cultivated society to become like this, to implement, methods of operation like problem, reaction, solution, things like that.
Yes, very much so, and I think you're quite right. It doesn't fall on the individual's heads. I don't fault someone necessarily for, say, being in a low-income neighborhood and resorting to crime, selling drugs, say, because that's the only thing that they've been brought up to do. That's right. The only option that they can see for feeding themselves. I think that these are larger problems. And one of the most major things is, like the person in the chat room said, is the establishment media, Hollywood, all of these people pushing video games even, and I grew up on video games, so I'm not one to quickly bash video games, but I think they're a major culprit in this too, is pushing moral relativism, saying in these certain situations you can do these things, it's okay, and there's so many movies like that now where it's someone getting revenge on someone, they hurt them in some way, so they go around massacring people or something like this, Right. And it's becoming more and more common, this theme of extreme moral relativism. And I consider myself either a moral absolutist or, leaning maybe in some circumstances towards pragmatism, in terms of, okay, someone's about to stab me in the chest and I have a gun, I'm going to defend myself. I'm not going to try and kill them, but I will defend myself.
Right.
I'm not going to let them stand there and kill me. That just doesn't make sense. So, there has to be some exceptions, but it's the total degradation of right and wrong. So there's this massive gray area where it's getting larger and larger to the point where everything is a gray area. There is no true right or wrong. And that's something that is disturbingly prevalent in my education, at least, is the idea that there is no right and wrong, that right and wrong is a societal construct and all those kinds of things. And I totally disagree. I don't think there are any circumstances where it's okay for someone to rape someone.
Right.
I mean, I just don't see how that is okay in any culture under any circumstances ever throughout time. And you can look, you're saying it's a product of society, and I think you're quite right, because you can look at some of these societies that have been found that are completely isolated. Like there was some tribe somewhere in the world. I read this a long time ago, so I'm kind of heavily paraphrasing here, but it was a group so isolated that no one knew existed. They actually didn't have words in their language for certain things that we've come to know, like rape and murder and these kinds of things.
Because they're common sense people, and they know that you shouldn't. That's not even within their thought pattern.
Yes,
we would never consider doing that. Why would we even make up a word to describe it?
Exactly, and like you said, it goes back to nature, and I'm not talking about hippy dippy new age nature. I'm talking about what humans are at the core level, which is social animals. Okay, we have to exist with other people. You will go insane. I mean, that's that happens all the time in solitary confinement. I mean, people go absolutely nuts because we are not made to be alone and isolated from other people. And modern society has just pushed that on us more and more, made it so easy to live an insular life where you have no contact with any people whatsoever. You can have friends that you only talk to on the internet. You can never leave your house, just have your food delivered to you. You can work from home and never actually interact face-to-face with anyone. You see what I mean? It's way too easy to isolate yourself in this kind of thing, and then you get detached from reality, and that's where the really bad things start happening. And like you said, someone who kills their whole family. If you look in a lot of these cases, especially serial killers, they'll have antisocial personality traits. That's one of the classic things. And I'm not saying, a lot of people will say, that's just made up by quack doctors to make people who rebel against societal rules into some kind of disease. And while yes, that is true, there is also a big difference. I believe that autism is a real thing, yet autism is so wildly overdiagnosed that I think a massive amount of the cases, the kids are just socially awkward, and yet they get diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, or they have a lot of energy, and then they're ADD. But there are real cases of these things. It's just blown up, and then that makes it so you can't deal with these kinds of things at all, and it once again polarizes people into these two camps where there's no such thing as depression, there's no such thing as ADD, all these things are just made up in order to make people money. And I don't agree with that, but I do agree with there's probably 5,000% more cases than there actually are, because obviously doctors do want to make money, and our pharmaceutical industry is completely morally bankrupt. They'd rather sell you something to make you sick so they could sell you something else to fix it.
Well, I think it was the CDC. It might be a CDC. I can't remember the organization right now, but one of them, one of the big ones, their main objective, decades ago was how can we medicate healthy people? That's what they wanted to do. So
yes, it was. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the FDA, because the FDA is so wildly corrupt. It's absolutely ridiculous when you get into some of the stuff. I studied psychology previously before I changed my major, but I saw a lot of problems in this stuff, and I saw a lot of good. I think that antidepressants, people shouldn't necessarily bash antidepressants across the board, because there are people who it's actually saved their lives, let's say, but there are many people who are just housewives who are having a bad day, and they say, hey, I'm going to pop some Prozac. There are people who give Prozac to their dogs. I'm not kidding.
I know some chick that's on it for weight loss.
Yes. Okay. See, that's absolutely absurd, and it offends me. It offends my sensibilities to even hear this kind of stuff, because that's what people can point to and say, look, across the board this is wrong, and it just muddies the waters so much. And it's a major problem. But I was watching a documentary some time ago about I'm blanking on the name, but I think it's called the madness industry or something like that, about the psychiatric industry, and about how they're constantly literally creating disorders in order to create a medication for it, or in some cases they'll actually create a medication and then after the fact create a disorder for the medication to treat. And once you start going through the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual, Volume 4 text revision, which is the latest one, you'll start flipping through there and you'll say, okay, well, this seems legitimate. And then you'll get into stuff where it's like, no way. Are they serious? They have a disorder for everything now, and it's because of the way it's structured. It's a bunch of psychiatrists, quote unquote eminent psychiatrists, whatever that means. It's like the title of expert or authority. You can apply it to yourself and then suddenly you're legitimate. But they get in a room and literally raise their hands to decide if this disorder is going to be in it or this one isn't. It's a joke. It's not scientific at all. And the FDA drug approval process is even more ridiculous. You are allowed to have unlimited financial conflicts of interest with the drug company that you're supposedly evaluating the drug for, as long as you declare it. And most of the trials, or the panels, I should say, are spent with a clerk reading through the conflicts of interest. I mean, I'm dead serious. It's like hundreds of pages of conflicts of interest. And, you know, once they go through that, it's fine. They can do whatever they want. So I think it's a greater trend, and it's the problem, reaction, solution trend. And the pharmaceutical industry does it. The defense contractors do it. You know, Homeland Security industry does it. Cybersecurity industry does it. I mean, they just do it over and over and over, is create a problem and then, you know, wait for a reaction. Oh, my God, we got to find something to fix this, and then they offer the solution. And that's, I mean, we see the pharmaceutical industry doing it all the time, and more recently, cybersecurity doing it, like in the case of the guy who incidentally, or coincidentally, I should say, of course, you know, no conspiracy here. It's just pure coincidence. This guy is a cybersecurity specialist who gets paid by people. He's like a consultant, gets paid by people to tell them how to secure their systems. And he discovers that Russian hackers, you know, disabled this water pump in Illinois, and oh my God, our whole utility industry is getting hacked by, you know, mysterious Russian
like that thing's on the internet. You know what I mean? It's just it's the stupidest thing.
And then he retracted it and actually deleted the whole statement from his website. And, like, I mean, he just tried to distance himself completely from it, because it turned out, you know, the Department of Homeland Security was like, well, actually, no, it was just a routine malfunction, like, the end. You know, he just looked like a complete idiot. And then more recently, MIT actually released a report, and it was hilarious. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. When you go through the quote-unquote advisors or consultants or whatever to the study,
right.
I mean, it was a pedigree of the people who would benefit from centralizing the utilities industry and, you know, putting some kind of shield on it.
Right? That was the people, Madison. It would benefit the general public.
Oh yeah, of course. It wouldn't benefit, you know, GE, who is, you know, sitting on the advisory board, or, you know, Southern California Edison, which was sitting on it. You know, all these people who would rake in the profits. No, it's us, because, you know, haven't you seen your house lights get turned off by some hacker from China? I mean, it's so common. We need to come up with a solution for it. Except it never happens, and it has yet to happen.
All right. As the show's winding down, we're not going to kill it right at 90, because I really want to get these last two questions in to you, okay? And we'll finish up with these. One, Patriot Act versus the NDAA. You know, to be honest with you, I didn't pay much attention to the NDAA. I mean, I knew what it was going to be for, but in my opinion, the Patriot Act pretty much covered that anyways if I was deemed a terrorist. So why do you think, what was the purpose of passing the NDAA after the Patriot Act?
Well, you're quite right, and one of the phrases actually in the NDAA is this does not expand the powers already allotted, you know, under the 2001 Authorization for the Use of Military Force and the Patriot Act, or, you know, they say previous legislation to cover all those bases. And you're right, it actually does allow for that, except not explicitly. It wasn't explicit in the language. It was the interpretation and the precedent that allowed them to do it. And that's what Senator Lindsey Graham said on the floor, is he said, well, we already have the right to do this. We're just putting it in writing so no one can argue about it. And so what I think it was, I think the Patriot Act was step one, set the precedents, you know, get some cases closed that, you know, involve indefinite detention, so we can have that basis, and then pass the NDAA so it's absolutely explicit. And under the NDAA, it's suspicion. That's all that's required. The Patriot Act, in a lot of cases, actually required some crime. I mean, jaywalking could be considered a terrorist act under the Patriot Act, but the NDAA requires absolutely nothing. So I think it's just I think I said this in a few articles, it's just explicitly codifying the indefinite detention so they can just do it whenever they want with no worries on their end.
Right. Now, and the last question is this. You, like I said, you mentioned earlier that you hope that you're wrong. You admitted that you don't think you are. I knew you were going to say that, because I don't think I am either, because I've watched this unfold over the last 10 years, and what do you think it's all for, Madison? Where are we headed?
What do they want to do?
That is really hard to say. I'd say if you look at the words of some of the most top level people, throughout the years.
No, I'm asking you. What do you think?
Well, that's I don't have an opinion on it because I don't know. That would be me trying to be psychic, and I can't. So I'm just going off what they said.
Hey, I'm not asking you to be psychic. Look, it's like I told you when you came on the show. I wanted to talk like we were kicked back on the porch having a beer. We can talk about these things. Everybody knows out there knows that. I always say this. All we're left with is basically speculation. I mean, unless you read the actual law like you did, there's still a hell of a lot in there left up to speculation and interpretation.
Oh, yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with us speculating, and we can preface that. I'm just really curious to get your opinion on it. If you want me to go first, I'll tell you we're headed towards the same thing Germany went through, but a lot worse because we have a lot more people. We have a lot more people dependent on society itself to even exist. The people exist, I mean. So, and I don't think that, in my opinion, Madison, we have been set up and fattened up for the kill in a lot of different aspects.
I think you're right. And what I was going to say actually is just based on the words of other people who have been behind this kind of stuff and pushing for this kind of stuff for years, it seems like the ultimate end goal is massively reducing the population of the world.
Right.
Essentially,
right.
That seems like the only conclusion that you can come to because they talked about it so often. It's so hard to ignore at this point. And there's so many different examples you can point to. But I love to point back to the National Security Study Memorandum 200, written under Henry Kissinger, which basically outlined this whole thing, which we're seeing unfold now, using food as a weapon to depopulate third world countries. And we see that in Somalia right now. I mean, it was actually in, I forget which publication it was off the top of my head, but it was an establishment media publication talking about how the thing that's killing all the Somalians is not drought and all this kind of stuff. It's actually speculators driving up the food prices and political issues and all this kind of stuff. And I honestly think, all roads lead towards depopulation on some scale.
And you know what? Every single person that wakes themselves up by wanting to investigate something on their own, whether it be the political spectrum like you've kind of done, whether it be the medical industry, the food industry, the radiation industry, every single person, every single one of them, that's the only conclusion they can end up coming to. That's it.
Yeah, because I mean, there really is nothing else that they could be working towards. With Monsanto absolutely destroying our DNA and making it so all food is tainted with this horribly dangerous materials, and like you said, the radiation industry. I mean, atmospheric testing of nukes. All this stuff that's absolutely insane.
Well, Fukushima right now, my friend. Fukushima. You're on the West Coast, right?
Yeah,
you should really
I've been breathing it.
Yeah, and you should be keeping up on that stuff. And we release not we, but Radchick from Facebook. I post them up, and so does Orion. She's working with Orion actually. Every 48 hours or every 3 days, she puts out a radiation fallout report for the globe. So, you're getting dosed over there. More in the northern part of the coast. But oh shit, Madison's dropped off again. All right, well, I think we're gonna call it there. Yeah, he just dropped off. Let me see, make sure he did. No, I didn't do it to him. No. He's off. But I'm going to plug Madison's stuff. Look, check him out. Obviously, you heard the kid's smart. He has endthelie.com as his website. Check out his Facebook page, End the Lie. What else is he have? Oh, right. And he has his new radio show, End the Lie Radio, starting in the Orion Talk Radio Network this Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My own stuff, again, you guys, get some friends over on the Front's Facebook page. Get them to like it. I need more people listening to the broadcast, okay? it helps keep the show on the air. So, and also check out the Front's website, frontradio.net. Shoot me an email. That's right. Shoot me an email. thefront@live.com, thefront@live.com. I'm sorry. Madison's show is on Orion Sunday at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sorry about that. He's back. You know what? I'm going to bring him on, let him plug his own stuff. Are you back again? Let's see. Think he's here. Is he almost here? No, he's not here. All right. So anyways, everybody, thanks for listening to the show. Sorry we had so many audio issues this evening. Don't know why that was going on. It sounded great in my headset. But listen, have a great weekend. We're back Monday, 6 p.m., usual time. All right, everybody, stay safe. Have a great weekend, and take these words of wisdom to heart, everybody. Good night.
Your choice is simple. Join us and live in peace, or pursue your present course and face obliteration. We shall be waiting for your answer. The decision rests with you.